Yeah, so it's very important that you walk away with this knowledge, because this is political knowledge, this is policy. This is policy that we voted for in a way, since we put Biden up there, right, to take Trump out. We were expecting for him to like make major changes. He did one little change. One little change. And it's actually putting kids more at risk, because they have to be now by themselves in order for the government to take them as refugees, right? But they're still not even giving them refugee status. Can you talk a little bit about the refugee status?
So refugee status is actually an application that you file outside of the United States. What people don't know is President Trump for an entire year did not admit a single refugee. Asylum status is the same thing as refugee status. You just seek it at a port of entry, which is a fancy term for the border, or from a year from the date that you entered, or if you had some type of status like a tourist visa, your status in the United States expired. And because President Trump did not admit a single refugee, he forced people to come physically to the US border. So he actually created all of that. A lot of people don't know that. I mean, he wouldn't want you to know that. But yeah, so refugee and asylum status are kind of the same thing. Asylum is a legal right. We actually agreed twice with the UN, and then we made our own domestic law in the 1980s, agreeing to take asylum and refugee seekers. So for people who tell you we're not obligated to do that, they need to shut up and sit down, because we are. We are. We agreed to it not once but twice with the UN, and we agreed to it in our own federal law. That's what created the Office of Refugee and Resettlement, which is what handles children that are alone at the US border or within the US. So that's just false. But yeah, that's...
Okay, so in attorney language, that sounds really good. Now, common language, let me get this understanding. So if I was in south of the border and I wanted to seek refugee, I need to apply for it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you would have to apply for refugee status within your own country, and it's a complicated process, and you would get a visa that would be issued to you, and then you would come into the United States with that refugee visa. Asylum, you can come to the United States and you can enter and you can apply for it within a year of getting here, or you can show up to a port of entry, which is legal speak for a border, and say, hi, I'd like to seek asylum. I'm fleeing my home country because of persecution. Also, the third country thing. Oh, if there's a safe country in between, you have to seek it there. No, that's not true. Nowhere in the UN agreements that we signed does it say that. Also, nowhere in our domestic law does it say that. That's a lie.
All right, last thing, because this is important for you to know. This is the knowledge we need, right? So when the Trumpsters or the nationalists are like, well, why can't they just do it the legal way? Why can't they just...
the legal way.
Woo! Say it louder.
Asylum is the legal way.
Woo! Now we're going to say it all together. All right, you ready? At 3. 1, 2, 3.
Asylum is the legal way.
Say it louder. One more time. 1, 2, 3.
Asylum is the legal way.
Woo! Now, before you walk away, just one little last piece. I believe Trump changed the law with asylum, right? Because asylum means as soon as you step over the line, now you can ask for asylum, right?
You can ask for asylum within the United States. So if you successfully enter on a visa, or if you cross, like you make it in here, you have a year to apply for asylum with, it gets into kind of like legal stuff, but with the Office of Immigration. Or if you're put into deportation proceedings, you can defend yourself and say, no, you should let me stay here because I qualify for asylum.
Okay, and I know that Trump changed the law where he moved the line. So between Mexico line and U.S. line, those is like no man's world. So then he's like, we're going to move the line. So when they leave Mexico in that no man's world, we get to like detain them before they cross the line. Is that it? Any of that true? That's what my understanding under Trump.
So immigration changes really easily because it's actually under the president's control. The attorney general can really fuck things up, and like quickly. So when you hear about asylum changing, like Jeff Sessions, he removed grounds of asylum. He actually took a case that under Obama allowed for women that are domestic violence survivors that's a grounds of asylum. He actually directed the case to himself for review so he could overturn it. No other type of law allows you to direct a case to yourself so you can overturn it. That's just not...
All right, thank you so much for all the knowledge. Thank you so much.
So to oversimplify, at least in terms of what Title 42 changes have been under Biden and Trump made Title 42 in March of 2020. It's actually a public health law which says that no immigrants can enter the United States. We can allow immigrants to be expelled instead of deported. So they're not allowed to do the normal legal channels, such as asylum. Under Trump, it applied to all immigrants. Under Biden, it only applies to adults and family units. So if you come to the border with your child as an adult, you will not be processed. So if your child shows up alone, they will be processed, because under Biden, Title 42 does not apply to unaccompanied minors, which is just a legal term for children under the age of 18 who are alone, who show up without a guardian, at least at the port of entry, or detained in the U.S. without a guardian. And so this is basically just encouraging family separation in Mexico. The parents have to make the decision before they enter the U.S. Under Trump, they were separated at detention. Under Biden, the parent has to make that decision in Mexico to either send the child alone to cross the U.S. border or to just stay with their child in Mexico and kind of just wait around until the United States government says that they'll start processing asylum claims again.
So in your opinion, this isn't less cruel than what Trump was doing?
I think it's honestly just as bad in a different way, because it basically forces the hands of parents to decide, do I stay with my child and take the chance that we may not have our case heard for a very long time? If at all, we may die. They're fleeing persecution. That's the whole point of asylum. So these people are in danger. You don't know who's persecuting them and who's following them and to where. And so this is a very real safety risk. And so a lot of these parents in desperation are sending their kids alone, because that may be their kid's only chance of survival. And they're taking the chance that they may not only never see their kid again, because the US government doesn't always reunite families, as we know, but also that parent may not survive.
So if you can't speak on this, that's fine. I'm curious to know your opinion on what part American foreign policy has been playing in creating this disaster to begin with.
My mother's from Guatemala.
Then you can definitely speak on this.
We overthrew their democratically elected government in the 50s. We lied about it the whole time, saying we had no idea about the massacres that were occurring, but the bodies that they dig up have American bullets in them. We equipped the Guatemalan government in committing genocide against their own people, particularly the indigenous people. I think that it's very easy for Americans to sit back and say, well, you know, these countries, you guys have to make it better. Well, we destroyed them. When you take a wrecking ball to a country and destroy the infrastructure, within the past 100 years, you know, the Guatemalan Civil War in treaty ended in the late 90s. My little sister was born in the late 90s, you know, my little sister. So it's super recent. I mean, the fact that we're just not going to take responsibility at all for the fact that we firebombed a lot of these countries' infrastructure is just disgusting.
Indeed. And I'm going to take that a step further and say that most of the time Americans have chosen to support regime change in these countries, overthrowing democracies, only because the regime change basically meant a government that was more business friendly.
It economically was beneficial to us. Yeah, I mean, in Guatemala, it was because of what's now the Chiquita Banana Corporation. We didn't want to pay taxes on a fair assessment of the land. If you're interested in it, I would recommend reading the book. I believe it's called Bitter Fruit. It's all about what we did. We actually targeted Guatemala because it was the least stable of all of the Latin American governments. We had a lot of land that we used to underpay and even pay in vouchers sometimes the indigenous people to farm fruit, and we didn't want to pay taxes on a fair assessment of the land. The new president was saying, no, that's part of my platform, you have to pay taxes on a fair assessment. We're not going to let you continue to undervalue the land and say you own less than you do. And so we got rid of him. That's what happened. And that's the story of a lot of those countries. And then we set the stage for just civil unrest.